If you think the feudal era was just knights, kings, and castles, you're dead wrong. There were things happening back then that would make any horror movie look tame. And the craziest part? It's all documented. Layer 1. The War of the Bucket. Imagine a conflict where thousands die over a bucket. Not a metaphor, literal. In the year 1325, the Italian city-states of Bologna and Modena plunged into a bloody war. The reason? Soldiers from Modena raided Bologna and stole an oak bucket from a public well. That object became a symbol of humiliation, and the spark that ignited the Battle of Zappolino. On one side, Bologna with more than 30,000 soldiers. On the other, Modena with just 5,000. The battle lasted 2 hours and claimed at least 1,000 lives, all over a piece of wood with a handle. And the strangest part? The bucket is still on display today in the Civic Tower of Modena, a real reminder of a conflict as pathetic as it was cruel. Perhaps the war was merely the reflection of something much deeper, as if logic had given way to a burlesque theater staged by medieval madness. The Erfurt latrine disaster. Erfurt, Germany. A grand hall filled with princes, counts, bishops, a political gathering of the elite of the Holy Roman Empire. But fate had a sense of humor, a very excremental one. The upper floor of the hall, old and poorly maintained, gave way under the weight of the nobles. In an instant, more than 60 of them plunged straight into the cesspit below, an old medieval latrine. They sank into exactly what you're imagining. The cream of the aristocracy, literally swallowed by filth, crushed, drowned, suffocated. There was no time for prayers or dignity. The feudal pomp collapsed, quite literally, amid the stench of rot. Some say hell needs no fire, only a rotten floor above a full pit. The Green Children of Woolpit. Suffolk, England. A field, a pit, 2 siblings. Green skin. They appeared without warning, spoke no known language, starving, but only ate raw broad beans. The villagers took them in. The green hue faded. The boy died. The girl survived. Eventually speaking English, she said they came from the land of St. Martin, a twilight place, sunless, where everything was green. They arrived by following cattle into a tunnel that led them to this world. Respected chroniclers documented the tale. It wasn't folklore. And if they didn't come from another world, what were they? Refugee children? Victims of disease? Or something in between worlds? The green skin vanished, but the questions didn't. To this day, Woolpit holds the echo of an event that feels lifted from a fairy tale, or something that was never meant to be told. The Dancing Plague of Strasbourg. A collective outbreak, but without blood, only footsteps. Footsteps that wouldn't stop. July 1518, Strasbourg. Frau Trophea begins to dance, alone, no music, no reason. Days later, dozens join her. In weeks, hundreds, dancing until they collapse, until they die. From exhaustion, the authorities, baffled, hire musicians, open dance halls, try to make the dancers dance more. 15 beats per day, heart attacks, collapses, a marathon of despair. The city leads them to the shrine of St. Vitus. They believed he could cure the dancing sickness. And as it began, it ended. Mass hysteria? Hallucinogenic mold? No explanation satisfies. Something caused hundreds of people to lose control of their own bodies, as if someone, or something, had taken their rhythm for itself. Layer 2. The Black Dinner of Edinburgh. In medieval Scotland, hospitality and betrayal shared the same table. King James II, only 10 years old, hosted a banquet for 16-year-old Earl William Douglas and his brother. Everything seemed cordial, until a bull's head was served, a veiled yet unmistakable symbol, a death sentence. The young nobles were dragged to the courtyard, executed on the spot. The king cried, begged, was ignored. What began as a meal became a ritual of execution, with such coldness that the name Black Dinner still haunts Scottish legend. In a court where smiles concealed blades, it was just another feast for power, served raw, with blood and revenge. The Witch Hunt of Arras. Before Salem, before the Spanish Inquisition, there was Arras, a hermit, confessed to Sabbaths with the devil, and accused others, an entire town. Within months, dozens were imprisoned, accused of kissing the enemy's backside, flying on broomsticks, and corrupting nature. The method? Simple. Confess or burn. Sometimes both. Confessions poured from the rack, the boiling oil, the fire underfoot, and each name spoken became another pyre waiting to be lit. In the end, at least 40 people were executed, most burned, all victims of an infernal theater where the audience clapped out of fear. The town was too small for so much shadow, and too big to forget. Khan Krum and the Skull Goblet. Bulgaria, year 811. The Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus invades, plunders, and falls into a deadly ambush. What followed wasn't recorded in war manuals, but in nightmares. Khan Krum didn't just kill Nicephorus. He had his head, the skull cleaned, and turned into a silver goblet. They say he toasted with wine before his nobles. Sometimes he even offered the cup to diplomatic enemies, a gesture of hospitality or a warning. Among the steppe peoples, drinking from the enemy meant power. But here, it was more. It was a message carved in bone and metal. Not even in death will you escape me. The goblet vanished with time, but the image, it never left the chronicles. Empress Irene blinds her own son. Constantinople, a mother on the throne, a legitimate son threatening to reclaim it. Empress Irene did not hesitate. She had him imprisoned. And then, on the night of the 15th of August, in the very chamber where he was born, Constantine VI was blinded with red-hot irons. A punishment with no return, no outward sign, no visible blood, but with a deafening message. Maternal love does not rule over imperial ambition. After that, Irene ruled alone, the first woman to lead the Eastern Roman Empire. Her act was so repugnant that the Pope, in the West, declared the Byzantine throne illegitimate. That vacuum of legitimacy paved the way for Charlemagne's coronation and the birth of the Holy Roman Empire. The empire bled from within, with eyes that would never see again. Layer 3. Pope Innocent VIII and the blood. Rome, at the end of the 15th century. Pope Innocent VIII is dying, an old exhausted body, with failing kidneys and death knocking fast. His doctors, in desperation, try something different. And when a doctor says different in this era, what he really means is grotesque. 3 boys, 10 years old, full of young blood. The idea was simple, almost primitive. If blood is life, then the most alive might reverse the inevitable. It was a ritual without altar, without cross, without miracle. The pontiff drank. The first boy died after the bleeding, the second shortly after, the third didn't even have the time. The Pope passed away days later, in silence, a silence that bled more than any scream. Accounts say his final vision was of a dark chalice, still warm. No one knows if he asked for forgiveness. Perhaps he still believed a miracle was underway. The story was recorded by enemies of the papacy, but does that matter? If it's a lie, someone invented it because it felt plausible, and sometimes, the rumor reveals more than the fact. The assassination of Edward II with a red-hot poker. You've heard of public but this was meant never to be seen. Edward II was King of England, deposed for betrayal, neglect, and scandal. But being deposed wasn't enough. They needed to ensure he never returned, and that his death wouldn't create a martyr. At Berkeley Castle, locked away and isolated, Edward met his end. According to reports, a red-hot iron rod was inserted through internal passageways. The method was precise. No external marks. The brutality had to remain invisible, but the suffering did not. That night, screams were said to echo for miles, screams that didn't sound human. Some thought they were wolves, others, the castle itself weeping. The experiments of Frederick II. Frederick II was called Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world, an emperor, a polymath, a visionary. But when the world marvels too much, something is wrong. Obsessed with knowledge, Frederick wanted to discover humanity's natural language. To do so, he ordered newborns to be raised with no human contact, feudal, washed, but without voice, without affection. He expected a language to emerge from the silence. Hebrew, Latin, Greek, nothing emerged, only death. All the babies perished, not from hunger, but from lack of human warmth. And he learned, without affection, life fades. But he didn't stop there. Frederick also wanted to understand digestion. He fed 2 prisoners a banquet. One slept, the other went hunting. Then both were open while still alive. Their stomachs compared. Science, they said. Was it? Or just curiosity disguised, forgetting the soul? Some say his notebooks contained one final experiment, to observe the soul leaving the body. The method? A barrel with a hole, and a man dying inside. Nothing was seen, but something was felt. Perhaps the soul left, and refused to look back. The Shepherd's Crusade. It began with faith. It ended in ruin. An improvised army of peasants and shepherds marched through France without the church's blessing. They cried for justice, demanded crusades, but what they did was storm Paris, loot, free prisoners. Then they marched south. In the cities they passed through, they left a trail. Forced baptisms. In Montcluse, hundreds were killed for refusing to abandon their faith. They were not soldiers. They were starving laborers filled with rage, driven by false preachers. Over time they became wandering bandits, and disappeared as they had come, in a whirlwind of collective delusion and brutality. The faith that once moved them became a knife in their hands, and the sound of their hymns turned to mourning. Some sources claim the last groups hid in the forests, but on certain nights, those who pass through the Garonne Valley still hear distorted chants from mouths that have forgotten their own names. Layer 4. The Cathar at Montségur. The fortress of Montségur stood so high in the Pyrenees mountains, it seemed closer to the sky than to the earth. But in March of 1244, the sky did not descend. Only fire rose. The Cathars, a sect deemed heretical by the church, resisted a brutal siege for 9 months, starving, weakened, yet unwavering in their faith. And when the fortress fell, they did not beg for mercy. 210 people refused to renounce their beliefs. They walked in silence to the foot of the mountain, where a massive pyre awaited them. They entered together. No chains, no force. The flames rose, but there were no screams. The scene froze even their enemies. Catholic chroniclers and Cathar sympathizers alike wrote with the same astonishment. They had never seen anything like it. The place became known as Prat dels Cremats, the field of the burned. But locals call it something else. They say that on moonless nights, the wind descends from the mountain with the scent of ashes, and sometimes it carries voices, singing. The Massacre of Béziers. The Albigensian Crusade, launched by the Church, promised to eradicate the Cathar heresy. But what happened in Béziers was more than eradication. It was extinction. The city was taken on the 22nd of July, 1209. Kill them all. God will know his own. That was the reply attributed to the papal legate when soldiers asked how to distinguish Catholics from Cathars. There was no distinction. Children, priests, pregnant women, all. The Church of St. Mary Magdalene, meant to be a sanctuary, became a slaughterhouse. Chronicles speak of 7,000 dead inside, another 13,000 in the streets. The city was looted, then set ablaze. The ashes spread, but the impact endured. Neighboring towns surrendered without a fight after learning what happened. For years, no one dared speak the name Béziers without trembling. Today, it's just a city on the map. But if you look closely, the shadow of what happened there still covers the rooftops. The Strasbourg Massacre. February 1349, St. Valentine's Day. But there were no flowers. Driven by panic over the Black Death, which had not yet arrived, the people of Strasbourg turned their fury on the city's Jews. Accused of poisoning wells, they became targets. Authorities who had protected them were overthrown. 2,000 Jews were imprisoned. Men, women, children, taken to the Jewish cemetery and tied atop a wooden platform. There, in the city center, they were alive. Some were forcibly converted and beheaded before the fire. Others held their faith and burned. The city seized their possessions and exiled the survivors. Months later, the plague did arrive. It killed nearly half the population. What remained was the echo of a wrong committed before the plague, one with no cure. They say the cemetery was covered in stone, but those who walk there feel heat, even in winter. Basil II and the Army of the Blind. After winning the Battle of Kleidion against the Bulgarians, Byzantine Emperor Basil II made a decision that chilled even his allies. He captured 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers, did not kill them, ordered 99 out of every 100 to be blinded. The 100th kept one eye to guide the others. When the army returned home, Tsar Samuel saw them approaching, a procession of shadow and flesh, groping the earth. And there, at the moment he realized what had been done to his men, the Tsar collapsed. Heart attack. 2 days later, he was dead. Basil went down in history as Bulgaroktonos, the Bulgar slayer. But he did not kill with weapons, he killed by denying sight. The image of that army's return was more devastating than any battlefield. They did not cry, did not scream. They only walked, led by one-eyed guides among the blind. Some say their steps were in sync, like a drum, beaten in the dark. Layer 5. The Bloody Verdict of Verdun. The name says it all. Verdict. Bloody. Verdun. Charlemagne, the imperial symbol of Christianity, had a mission to convert the Saxons, but they resisted, and they won. The Battle of Suntel was a disaster for the Franks. Then came the response. Not a war, a spectacle. Charlemagne gathered 4,500 prisoners, ordered them all executed in a single day, beheaded, one by one, for hours. The ground soaked, the executioners rotated shifts, the air saturated. The massacre was recorded in the Royal Frankish Annals, and to this day, historians debate, was it real, an exaggeration? But the echo remains, because real or not, someone thought it made sense, and history called him a holy emperor. Verdun has no grand monuments, but if you stop there and close your eyes, you might hear the sound of axes, rhythmic as psalms. The Children's Crusade. Sometimes horror doesn't come with spears, it comes with hope. 2 boys, 2 countries, 1 promise. We will free Jerusalem. Stephen, in France. Nicholas, in Germany. Both young, both visionaries. Or perhaps just children leading other children into nothingness. About 30,000 followed Stephen to Marseille. There, 2 merchants offered ships. But it was a trap. They sank near Sardinia. Those who survived were sold as slaves. Nicholas led thousands across the Alps. Hunger struck them. Cold broke them. But they reached Genoa. They expected the sea to part. The sea stayed. Some returned, others remained. Nicholas vanished. Some say his parents were lynched, and that those who returned never spoke. Not out of fear, but because there was something in their eyes, something that should never have looked into the abyss, and did. Vlad the Impaler. There are leaders, there are monsters, and then there is Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, known as Tepesh, the Impaler. In 1462, when the Ottoman Empire invaded his land, Vlad did not retreat with armies. He retreated with a warning. Around the city of Targovishte, he planted a forest of stakes, and on each stake, a body. About 20,000 prisoners impaled, some still alive. The Turks arrived and halted. The Sultan withdrew. They say the scene was so silent, only the crows could be heard. But Vlad didn't stop there. He invited nobles to a feast. After the wine, he impaled them all. Ambassadors who refused to remove their turbans, iron nails driven into their skulls. Some call him a national hero, others say he didn't, just changed form, and waited beneath history's surface until the world once again needed monsters with human faces. Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. Imagine a castle. Stone halls, damp corridors, tapestries a little too red. Now, imagine screams. Not those echoing out, but those that never left. Elizabeth Bathory, Hungarian aristocrat, scholar, respected, and accused of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of young peasant girls. The victims vanished. Some reappeared in pieces. Others were never found. The methods varied. Needles under hot irons, honey and ants. In winter, left naked in the snow, doused in freezing water until they became statues. Records say she bathed in, likely an exaggeration, but the bodies were there. When authorities finally entered the castle, what they saw remained silent in their reports. Some spoke of stacked corpses, others of girls still breathing. She was not executed. She was sealed alive inside her own castle, in a room without windows. She died there, with only the walls as witnesses. Today the site is a tourist attraction, but no one sleeps there. And some say if you listen closely, you can hear laughter, smothered, echoless.